morning. My name is Mike Mizell. I'm a retired Army colonel and president of the Johns Creek Veterans Association. We meet in Newtown Park, and part of one of our projects is the installation of the Healing Wall, the half-scale model of the Vietnam Wall that traveled the United States. Well, it's coming to rest, and it's going to live in Johns Creek forever, the half-scale model. We're looking at possibly a March implementation ribbon-cutting ceremony, and we're looking for donors and sponsors that want to help us in this great project. You can donate at jcvets.org.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Hey, I feel all right now. Hey, I feel all right now. Do you feel like I do right now? Do you feel like I do right now? Motivated, sky high, rock steady, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, yes. Feel all right now, and we do feel all right, even if it is a little damp outside, and damp might be underestimating what it's doing. But we do feel good, and we have a very special guest that you just heard from a few seconds ago, and that's Colonel Retired Mike Mizell is in our studio today, and he's going to be talking about a subject that's near and dear to my heart because a lot of friends are on that, and that's the Healing Wall that's coming to Johns Creek. Actually, it's in Johns Creek already, and they're turning it into quite a thing. And it's the Healing Wall is the half-size replica of the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., and Mike has been totally instrumental in bringing that to Johns Creek, Georgia, and what it's going to mean to the area is, and the stories that we've already heard about it. Now, this is the wall that traveled all over the United States, and I don't know, Mike, welcome to America's Web Radio. Thanks for coming back in and talking about it. You've got a big date coming up in March. How many states did this particular wall travel to? Do you know offhand?
Honestly, I don't know how many states it's traveled through, but I would think that it's probably hit the vast majority of the states. It's been traveling the country for over 10 years. They now have a three-quarter scale model that's traveling the country. The half-scale model that we have is the one that we brought to Johns Creek back in March and April of 2017, and we had it there for 3.5 days. Then we found out that it was being retired and would be used by the foundation in Washington, D.C. as a fundraiser. So we got into that battle, and with some very generous donors, we were able to purchase it and bring it home to Johns Creek, and we've had it in storage. Started the groundbreaking event in July of last year and really got off the ground in September, starting with the concrete foundations that we put in place.
Who came up with the idea of a traveling wall? Do you know offhand?
I saw something this morning. I was looking at one of the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Fund sites, and they have a number of different videos you can go to. There was a Vietnam era sergeant, he was in Vietnam, but he started the foundation group back in the early 80s. That they got started on the idea of having a wall in D.C. There was a great deal of controversy with some Congress members, whether it was coming out of the ground. Some people thought it was disrespectful, but it was intended to show the honor and the gallantry of the men and women that served in uniform, that actually served in Vietnam. So I'm glad they got all those issues ironed out, and we've got that great monument up in the D.C. area.
You know, and I make it perfectly clear anytime we're talking Vietnam. I did not serve in Vietnam. I had a number of friends that did. I was in what they call now the Vietnam era. I served during that time, but I did not serve in Nam. But so many friends did, and the wall, you know, I went to the wall in D.C., and it's what you all are doing is just a most admirable thing, and this will go from friends like myself, and then it'll trickle down to grandkids and great-grandkids, and oh yeah, I remember I heard about a family member named so-and-so that they'll keep looking them up and for now and forever. And it's even like when I go to Savannah and some of the little squares that they have with monuments from the Civil War and stuff. It's interesting to see your name, General so-and-so, that must have been my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather or something,
Yeah.
And but I think the Healing Wall, beautiful name that will last forever.
Well, the beauty of that is if you come in, I would encourage people come to Newtown Park. It's the address is 3125 Old Alabama Road. It's at Newtown Park, and it's right across the street from Fire Station 63 in Johns Creek. But in our Center Park area where we're located, there is a placard there, and it was a comment from Heather Birch, who's the author of One Lavender Ribbon. And it says this on that placard: I make a promise, and this was from a letter written by a gentleman in World War II. I make a promise to the men who are serving beside me. I will never forget you. I will never forget what you gave. I have no way to honor these men save this. I will tell their story to my children and my grandchildren, and I will tell of their heroic deeds, and because I will, a part of them will live forever. What other gift can I give? What a beautiful thing to say, and then that we can add to our memorial that already exists there, that we can add the half-scale model of the traveling wall for the Vietnam era soldiers, the Vietnam soldiers that served, men and women both, because there's 8 nurses' names that are on that wall that made the ultimate sacrifice in Vietnam as well. So we plan to have this there. The opening ceremony is on the 28th of March, as indicated before. We now have a time locked in at 10. If the weather continues to cooperate a little bit so we can do without some of this rain, that's been a real showstopper for us for quite a bit of time now.
Mike, and I mean this very sincerely as a compliment, you've turned an aircraft carrier around in the bathtub, and what I mean by that is there was so much hostility towards Vietnam, and it was they tried to compare it to Korea as another policing action, and I'm not sure that anybody ever totally has grasped what we were doing there, or even the government, for sure. We heard all sorts of reasons and this and that and all this, but when friends came back from Vietnam, they weren't exactly greeted as heroes, and it was a sad scenario for our country. And yet, with what you've done, that's why I feel like you've turned the aircraft carrier around in the bathtub, and you are honoring those that gave the ultimate sacrifice. But you're not only doing that, you're also saying, listen up, folks. There are people still protecting us. There are people still raising their right hand to protect you, your ideas, and your thoughts for the future. And you're not just remembering the past, but you're also building the future with what you're doing. Well,
that's part of what the Johns Creek Veterans Association is all about, because there wasn't a Veterans Foundation in Johns Creek until we started that one in 2012. But that's a big part of our focus, is looking forward to young men and women that are still putting the uniform on, going around the country and going around the world literally, and finding ways to support them, not only them as they are serving us overseas, but help look out for their families back here, because that's part of that military mindset, that military family, if you will, and that camaraderie that develops that I don't think anybody else outside the military really understands.
No, and well, I'll just put a plug in for America's Web Radio right now, in that if you're listening to Mike, and I hope you are, if there's a lady out there, we're looking to start a new show called Left Behind. And, you're talking about kids all over the world serving their country. I'm very well aware of that with my youngest son that's in Germany right now at Ronstedt, and his wife. Mm-hmm. And I can't forget Beauregard, the dog. But anyway, Bo. But we're also looking for a lady that can appreciate, because another weird, or not weird, but the military is not stagnant. It's changing every day, and it changed with Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And this was the first time, and we started it back when it first happened, was that NGs and ARs were called up because we didn't have enough men and women to really do what had to be done. And so you have a group of people that had volunteered, raised their hand to defend and protect, and with the idea that, well, we probably won't ever be called up, but they were, and that's Army Reserve and the National Guard, and they have served very proudly. We have some in the Hall of Fame, and I'm sure you have some in Johns Creek. And those folks, they left their wives behind in suburbs, which active duty, and you were active duty on a base, and it's all the difference in the world, because you have, like my daughter-in-law, when my son is deployed, well, she has the base and the base ladies and organizations that take care of her and help her and do this and do that, whereas the NGs or ARs that left for Desert Shield or Desert Storm, they left their wives and 2 or 3 kids, or it may be that the wife was deployed and the husband stayed back with 2 or 3 kids.
Correct.
And so it's been a real change, revolution in what we've done in the military.
Well, the Army Reserve and National Guard units, the members of those organizations come from so many different areas.
Oh yeah.
And they're not in a small contained area like you would have on a military installation. So there's not that mindset. The community doesn't immediately recognize the need and step up and say we need to form some type of support group for these people that are back here, because a big part of what makes them a central family unit is not here right now.
And that's what we tried to do on the station, is to let people know that if your neighbor has been deployed, somebody still needs to change that light bulb or fix that door or do this or do that. Raise your hand to help the ARs and NGs that their spouses have been deployed and you're the one left behind. And church groups are good for that as well.
Yes.
So anyway, let's talk more about the wall. Let's talk more about the park too. What else is going to be in the park that will be an attraction, and nationally, are you all going to be promoting it as well?
Something that we absolutely need to do. I think Charlie Kelly, one of our members, just saw an article in the AJC that Martha McCallum on Fox News wrote a book.
Oh yeah, about World War II.
About World War II. Her uncle, who was a very young member of the group of Marines that went on to Iwo Jima, and I think she calls it Forgotten Valor or something like that, and it's a tribute to her uncle and what he did during World War II. And those are the kinds of things that we need to keep doing all over, especially as we bring more people into the Johns Creek area and from outlying areas, so they can come see the memorial that's in the park, because it reaches out and it honors all veterans from all services, and it covers the period, like I said, from World War I through current incursions. And then part of the Johns Creek Veterans Foundation or Veterans Association purpose is to support units that are deployed, and see what we can do to provide any type of support that we can muster and get to them. I know there's a group at the Alpharetta United Methodist Church that collects Oreo cookies, and they send thousands of pounds of Oreo cookies to deployed units overseas. And
they send the cow with it?
Pardon?
Do they send the cow with it?
I don't think they send the cow, but you got to have the milk to go with it. But those are the kind of neat things, and people don't realize how much those little bitty things mean. It's just like some of the school groups that we've connected with that write letters every year to thank a military service member. We send those to overseas units. We take those down to the Veterans Hospital for those that are in beds there without family, and the other part is to make it more aware.
I have let things run over. We need to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Colonel retired Mike Mizell talking about the Healing Wall in Johns Creek among many other things. And I want to get back to what you were talking about with Oreo cookies and other little things that mean so much. We'll be back right after this.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
Good morning. My name is Mike Mizell. I'm a retired Army colonel and president of the Johns Creek Veterans Association. We meet in Newtown Park, and part of one of our projects is the installation of the Healing Wall, the half-scale model of the Vietnam Wall that traveled the United States. Well, it's coming to rest, and it's going to live in Johns Creek forever, the half-scale model. We're looking at possibly a March implementation ribbon cutting ceremony, and we're looking for donors and sponsors that want to help us in this great project. You can donate at jcvets.org.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Okay, we're back on America's Web Radio, and this is basically the Georgia Military Hall of Fame show, more or less, and I always want to put a shout out and thank Rick White. He is retired colonel, as is our guest, Mike Mizell, and they just do a wonderful thing and keeping those informed. And Mike, you touched me a second ago on something that you said, and like I said, I was not in Vietnam, but even on active duty, you always appreciated that letter from home. And today we have Skype and we have Messenger and we have all the things on the computer that, and I love the fact that I can talk to my son that's in Germany, and it's not like getting a hug from him, but it's nice to see him and see that he's okay, and whatever. I have no idea. My dad was a naval commander, and it would take 2 and 3 and 4 weeks for a letter to get to my mother, or for my mother to get a letter to my father during World War II. And how hearing your name in mail call is probably one of the most exciting things that you can hear. I got a letter, and it's like the little gifts of the Oreos or whatever it might be. Somebody out there is thinking about me. And it's like going up to the first responders in the mall, or seeing someone in the airport that's in their, what we used to call fatigues, or in uniform or with a cap on. I'm a World War II veteran, or I'm a Vietnam veteran, or whatever. Just go up and thank them, and or buy them a meal. Yeah. It will mean a whole lot more to you than it even does to the person that you're giving it to, just because it'll make you feel good, but it'll also make them feel good and feel appreciated.
Yeah, I know that's something I've seen a number of people doing, and it's been encouraged more with our veteran groups, the numerous veteran groups that I'm in, church groups, Sunday school classes and whatnot, is, when you see these first responders in there having a breakfast or a meal or something like that, just get the waitress to pull aside and say, bring me their tab, and just tell them from a grateful neighbor, stay safe and we appreciate what you do. That goes so far. And you're talking about mail call. You could be having the worst week of your life somewhere overseas, and mail call comes out and you get a letter from home, and your whole attitude changes just instantaneously, especially sometimes when there's a little box and mama sends you some cookies, or your girlfriend sends you something, or you get something from the spouse or whatever. Those
cookies may be crumblies, but doesn't make any
You
difference.
squeeze them back together and make a cookie, whatever you need to do. We've got one little group of ladies up in Johns Creek that meet every Wednesday morning at the Park Place Center, and they are knitters. And we approached them some time back, and they started knitting skull caps and scarves. And I've got several 40-gallon bags full of those right now that we collect from these ladies. They give it out of their love of their heart and what they're doing. And we'll send those to units that are deployed overseas into colder areas, just as a little reminder from home that somebody was thinking about you, somebody cared about you. You know, there was one other event that we had where we had a young man from Centennial High School who went on to West Point, and he was a second lieutenant or first lieutenant at a combined combat base in Afghanistan. And he wrote his dad a letter and said, I am so tired of playing soccer, and I'm so tired of playing cricket, because they were with Australians and Brits and some others, joint base. And he said, I would love to teach him to play softball. So we got that message from his dad. We went to some of the local shops and some of the high schools, and we gathered up enough equipment to field 3 softball teams.
Wow.
With bats, balls, bases, the whole 9 yards. And what we found out and what we have pictures of is these huge helicopters flying in from outlying areas to come to the joint base to play a softball game. So when the base finished its mission and they were redeployed to the United States, the commander of that group, along with that young man, brought us the flag that flew on the last day over that compound at their joint base in Afghanistan. So we have that with some beautiful pictures of guys in uniform and then guys in softball gear playing softball as well. So that was a great thing to do. Made an impact on their life.
You know, you and I were talking about it in the lobby a minute ago, and it's sad to me that I know we're talking to some people today that don't understand, and they never will understand at this point, because they're probably my age or might even be older, heaven forbid, but that don't understand the camaraderie, the acceptance, the fraternity, sorority that the military is. It's the largest in the world. And the relationship you have, and I would venture to say, I don't know of the dates that you serve, but I would venture to say you still got some buddies that you keep in contact with from whatever era it was. And this is, you go through it, and you go through it knowing that this is my little payback to a country that I love.
Well, we tell people, and I remind people, sometimes I get veterans who say, I don't feel like I did enough. I said, well, look at it this way. There's 3 different groups in the military that I call them. It's the combat soldiers, the combat support, and the combat service support. And without all of those key pieces doing their part, the warfighters can't do their jobs. Whether you're a logistician back in Virginia or you're running a supply warehouse out of Arizona, you got things that you need to do to help the whole effort. So that's why they teach you to take the word I out very quickly. There's no I in team. You've heard that acronym,
Right.
I'm sure. I was a Vietnam-era soldier as well, straight out of college in 1973, as an enlisted man. Went through OCS almost a year later and got commissioned as a lieutenant. And was in the MP Corps, and you're saying in support groups. I still have soldiers reaching out to me that were in my company when I was a company commander back in 1979 to 81 time period. And there's been several other groups, and I know there are others like the Rangers and group that have these groups as well. But just in the MP group, we have several thousand. Every morning there's a gentleman over in Alabama that says, wake up and welcome the world, brothers and sisters. It's a good MP morning. And he tells us what the temperature is in Bessemer, Alabama. And then people start chiming in from all over the country saying, it's 64 and raining in California or whatever. So it's kind of neat to see those. And what's even more special is some of those that have now gone back to areas that we were stationed in. Germany, for example. I was there 3 different times. So many of those communities, Mannheim and that area, has been turned back over to the German government and showing what they're doing to destroy some of the buildings and stuff there, what their plans are for that. It was kind of
Were you
neat to see those pictures.
ever in Kaiserslautern?
Kaiserslauten's just up the road a little piece, but no, I'd go down there to the Air Force bases. Yeah,
That's where my son is.
I was in Mannheim and Heidelberg 3 different times.
Wow.
Phenomenal area, but I've had soldiers reach out to me and tell me that was probably the most impactful and the most meaningful part of their life was when they were an MP serving in Germany supporting the troops. You know, the moniker of the MPs is of the troops and for the troops, because we are soldiers as well.
Sure. Well,
but we deal with that community just like our local police officers have to deal with our civilian communities back here.
what's the old saying in the Army? Everybody is a soul. Everybody is infantry.
Yeah, basic infantry. You always
Yeah.
are. Yeah, you learn that first, and then you become specialized.
And it's I'll spit out here that, again, I think everybody should serve in some capacity one way or the other. And if you're a high school student going into college or a college student coming out of college, think about the military. It's, people in days past had such a bad taste, but it is a great occupation, and you will learn things that you had no idea about. And I mentioned this to Rick White the other day, that I see I'm 73 years old. It's been a long time since I was at Fort Ord, and you went through it. We all went through basic and AIT and all this, and why in the hell are we doing that? That's about it. But the military has a rhyme and a reason for doing almost everything. And it may take years, I'm so dumb, it took me years to realize what a psychology class you're going through when you're in the military. And there's, like I said, there's a rhyme and a reason for it. And a lot of boys become men. And I salute the military. I can only speak for the Army. I wasn't in the Navy or Marines or anything else. I was just in the Army. But I look back on it, and what an experience.
I tell people all the time, I said, look, if you get through high school and decide not to go to college or technical school, and you really don't know what you want to do with yourself, this is a fantastic way for you to mature, to see the world on Uncle Sam's nickel, be a productive part of something bigger than yourself, learn that it's more than just about self anymore. And then you learn going from that even though you may get out before you retire, even after you retire, you take the uniform off, but you never break the oath that you took when you started. It doesn't go away. That oath is going to be there with you for the rest of your life.
There's still OD in your bloodstream.
It's there. Yeah, I guarantee you, every soldier that you could approach right now could probably repeat that oath right now and tell you exactly what it was and what it means to them. And that's what it's all about, service to others. And we take that with us into our communities when we do that now, and to try to find better ways to support our communities every day. And I'd love to see more veterans, especially up here in North Fulton, get involved. I think I mentioned to you on a show previously that the 2012 census up in the North Fulton communities identified over 15,000 veterans back in 2012. Well, we're 8 years later, and I know there are a lot more veterans in those, because I've met some of them at Newtown Park at the memorial that have moved into the area. I just met a Navy doctor yesterday whose wife, her father's from Texas, and he followed them from Texas to Georgia. So he's now living up in the Cumming area. He's a Vietnam Marine, Vietnam-era Marine that served. And, it's important that we find those and get them connected into the various groups that are around here. So that brings it back. That brings back that camaraderie, that special feeling. And like you said, it's a special group that the minute you walk in the door, you're connected. You're one of the guys, one of the gals. And that's what's so important and so unique about military service.
And I've mentioned the name many times, and General Dix and I do a show together on Monday at 1 o'clock. And General Dix, and again, only somebody that's been in the military would appreciate that. I personally, as an E5, never thought that I'd be sitting at a table with a general and talking to him, not disrespectfully by any means, but just having fun, chatting and kidding each other. And he is just a wonderful, wonderful person, and he's doing and going to be doing some great, great things for vets and homeless vets, and we'll be talking about that in the near future. But I told Colonel Mizell a minute ago that there's 1 out of 4 homeless or street people are veterans, and folks, you got to help us do something about that. And there are plans of people working. A lady named Frankie Holbrook has Shine His Light Ministry, and she's out talking to these vets day in and day out on the streets at all hours of the day and night. And Frankie has her own foundation, and if you can afford to give anything, it would be appreciated by what she's doing to spread the word and help the veterans that need help. And I would say the one thing that has been spotlighted, and I know Birdwell is quite involved with this, but has been spotlighted, and yet I really don't, and I've been working with it. We used to do a show on PTSD, but there's always been PTSD ever since the revolution. Ever since a bullet went whizzing by your head, that'll get your attention, and you thank God that it didn't hit you in the head. But it can cause all sorts of kind of mental traumas with folks.
Well, the brain's an amazing thing, and through our eyes we see stuff, and it's like taking a picture and you tuck it away in a file. And some of us are more adept at handling those files as we get older, and some of us aren't, and that's where it's become the PTSD is the issue now, or traumatic brain injury now. It used to be shell shock or battle fatigue, called by different names, and I've had World War II vets and Korean vets saying, I'm finally beginning to understand why I felt the way I did all those years. It was PTSD.
Sure.
Nobody had ever diagnosed it back during my time. But I've gone to work with the Birdwell Foundation as the executive vice president here in Georgia for the PTSD Foundation. And our focus now is getting more units that support veterans in their various communities. We're in about 7 or 8 different communities right now, and growing in the North Georgia area. And part of that is to find other organizations, and maybe from the Birdwell Foundation I can do more of this, has become a clearinghouse. When I Googled PTSD the first time, I had over 100,000 hits all over the country, all these different organizations, different people wanting to do so much for veterans in these issues, and I really appreciate that. But what is central to this is a clearinghouse that can coordinate efforts among these different groups. We don't all have to go out and reinvent the wheel and all do all the same stuff. If we specialize in doing certain things, we find other groups that can provide medical equipment, that can go in and refurbish someone's house to make it more accessible for them. Help them with their benefits. We've got Dr. Tom Poston up in the Cartersville area working with about 65 veterans right now, the largest group, support group, helping them put their paperwork in and get that paperwork done. And a fantastic shout out to Rita Barnhart up in Canton from the State of Georgia Veterans Office. She is an amazing lady. She can work you through and help you get your paperwork done. I just had my disability packet reevaluated, and they start to finish was less than 90 days. And that's unheard of, but she did it, and she was great at it. And the Tom Poston is doing the same thing for a lot of other vets in those areas. So we've got a group of about 65 up in Cartersville. We're opening a group in Rome. That's what's so important. You go through some training and treatment programs for PTSD with the VA or some of the other hospital units and stuff, but there's not, from what I've been able to find out, there's not a lot of follow-up. And that's where the Birdwell Foundation puts these groups together in these different cities. They're run by combat veterans, so that in many cases the person that veteran is now having to deal with is a combat veteran who's been there and done that. So there's that instant link that works so well, and then it's every week that opportunity to meet together and check on one another to see where you are, what is it that you need, and how can we help you. We hope to take that all over the state of Georgia, work other relationships with Warriors to Citizens and Doc Attaway and his group from the 75th Rangers and others as well, to find out how we can share the wealth, share the assets that we have, the capabilities that we have. As Ronald Reagan said, it doesn't matter who gets the credit. We're all in this for the same reason. It's to help the vets and the first responders. That's what's critical.
And with that, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back on America's Web Radio with retired Colonel Mike Mizell. We'll be right back.
The Docs for Patient Care Foundation is your way to join the fight and become a member of an organization created by doctors for patients dedicated to fighting for your healthcare freedom and preserving the doctor-patient relationship. Get a pen and paper. Write down www.docsforpatientcarefoundation.org. That's www.docsforpatientcarefoundation.org. Go to our site and please make a generous tax-deductible donation and join the fight today. Thank you. Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
If your health insurance premium is more than your mortgage, Ellen Deal with Ideal Solutions is here to help. Whether you're a small business owner, individual, family, or baby boomer, email maga45cag@gmail.com and I'll respond with 3 easy questions to help you determine if you can get away from Obamacare. As a 20-year veteran of the insurance industry, I'm here to help with all your insurance needs. Email Ellen Deal at maga45cag@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You're listening
let
to
me do
America's
this.
Web.
First and foremost, I am so appreciative of what American Web Radio is doing. They reach out and reach to such a huge community and keep so many veterans connected, and it's more of what we need to do. And Dave, thank you personally for having me and other representatives of the military community on. I know Colonel Rick White is a great friend of mine and with the Hall of Fame, and he's also a member of the Johns Creek Veterans Association, lives up in our area up there, but we're working very closely together on a number of things to make life better for veterans in general, and we really appreciate what you and this radio station are doing to promote that.
Well, it's our pleasure, and it means it's sort of like buying the meal in the airport. I get a lot more out of it than I give, and I would like to give much, much more. And with that being said, whoever's listening, if they want to reach out to us and have any suggestions about shows or anything else that we can do or information that they might need, just contact me at David at America's Web Radio, and we'll get somebody on it here at the station doing whatever needs to be done. And
not only to support it, we're looking for sponsors and donors for the Johns Creek Veterans Association to support our program as well, but also with the Birdwell Foundation. We're having a huge gala on the 16th of October to support our efforts here in Georgia. The money that comes here will stay in Georgia, so we're looking for some recurring sponsors. Our benefactor, Gene Birdwell, is been very blessed by God and has a number of businesses that give him the capability to, by and large, support entirely the functions that are going on now in 8 states. I was just looking at some numbers. Last year in Georgia alone, we represented and made contacts with over 1,600 veterans here in Georgia. We have over 700 veterans involved in about 9 different groups now that we've set up in some of the North Georgia communities, including a new group that we just started in Columbus with the units that are down there. And we're also starting a women's sexual trauma group in the Columbus area as well going forward. And then we also have a group that's dedicated to support of family members impacted by family members who have PTSD. Because if you've got a veteran that has PTSD, a first responder, then you've got a family that's involved as well. A mom or a dad, depending on the situation, is trying to hold the thing together. And I see it as our responsibility there is to help them get their feet solidly back on the ground. That's what we owe them from their communities. The Birdwell Foundation supported over 10,000 veterans in 8 states last year alone, and we did that mostly with contributions, that some contributions from outside, but mostly from what Gene was able to put through from his companies. So we're looking for sponsors now that will come on board with us on an annual recurring basis so we can continue to expand these programs. Right here in Georgia, we have over 700,000 veterans in Georgia alone. I think it's one of the top 4 states where young men and women enter the service. And saying that, less than 2%, and people out there need to realize this, less than 2% of Americans will ever put on a uniform and serve this nation. And it's because of their duty, their sacrifices, and what they commit to do that you have the freedom that you have and that you enjoy. And I think the schools don't do us a service anymore. They don't really publish and put forward that message to our young people to know what their history really was and what it meant and what the sacrifices that have been made.
You know, Mike, if I can add one thing to that, and we touched on it earlier, it's not just that one person or the 1% or 2% that join, it's their whole family.
Sure.
I know, it's so much different from when, and I wouldn't lighten my parents' eyes when my dad was in World War II. I wouldn't even have thought. But shortly thereafter, as soon as he got back anyway. But the point being is that it's like, if you have a member that is, it doesn't matter whether they're first responders or military, whatever it is, one shape, form, or fashion or another, they're putting their life on the line for you and me. Every night that we go to bed, well, you've got somebody out there protecting us and doing things that I don't want to go in a dark warehouse and see what's on the other side of the wall, and I don't want to be in a foxhole either. I've been there, done that, and I'm not real, that's not one of my things I raise my hand for. I much prefer my bed. But we got to realize, and people have to realize, it's the whole family that serves. When you raise your right hand and protect and defend, you say that you give the oath and you take the oath, and you're committing your family to the same thing. And they're going to miss you. You're going to miss holidays. You're going to miss kids growing up. You're going to miss 1,001 things. But you've made the choice that you love your country and you love your city or state or whatever it is that you're defending, and that affects everybody that's involved with you.
Well, you say that you love it all because you do, and you see the things it's given you. A lot of people will go in the military because they don't know what they want to do the rest of their life, and then they get in the military and they find a great career, great skill sets, and they stay for a long time. Others go in and you come out as a mechanic, and you can find a great job in some of the automotive shops and stuff around here, or you go in the medical field or legal practices. All those things that are in your regular community are there in the military, just under a different set of rules and expectations. But every one of them, and I say this to all of my veteran friends out there, whether you are a combat veteran or not, you're a veteran. You're a veteran first and foremost. You raised your hand, you took the same oath, you signed the same blank check that every other military veteran member did. God had a different plan for you, and that's why you came home and you're still here to talk with us. And we've lost so many in so many events around the world that we need to remember those. And this installation of the wall in Johns Creek, I'm just so excited about being able to do that for the community and the veteran communities all of North Georgia. We've even had some inquiries from out of state, people saying, we hear that the wall is coming to Georgia. So yes, it is. It's permanently coming to Georgia, and it's going to stay here. So we're glad that we can bring that and present it to our communities.
And I expect you, whoever's listening, to go take a look at the wall. And when you do that, be sure and bring names of your friends and loved ones that may have participated in Vietnam in one shape, form, or fashion. And maybe they came back or maybe they didn't, and they're honored on the wall. And I think the name Healing Wall is fantastic in that there was a lot of sores and a lot of resentment and un-Americanism, and a lot of things happened there in Vietnam, and our kids don't know about it. And like you said, our public schools and our public education have let us down, but it was a different time, a different place. And I've said this before, and correct me if I'm off on a tangent someplace, but in some ways we had the expectation that or I look at World War II as quote unquote somewhat of a clean gentleman's war still, and that you had this side over here, and you had our side over here, and you had their planes, our planes, and it was sort of you could tell who the enemy was a lot of times. But in Vietnam, we not only had the enemy in Vietnam, but we also had the enemy at home, and it was just a totally different kind of situation that our country had never lived through, and the shame of the public, and it was disgraceful the way they treated men and women coming back from Vietnam.
In the 60s and 70s, it was very tough on veterans coming in anywhere. It didn't matter whether you were coming home from Vietnam or not. If you were just wearing the uniform, you were a target for hate groups, and that's really sad. I can recall that there were times saying if you were flying in, when you first get there, go in the restroom and change into some civvies, get out of the uniform as soon as possible, so you just don't have to deal with those confrontations. So it was a tough time, and this is just part of an effort to say to those veterans, welcome home. Thank you for your service, and to the 53,000 names on there, thank the families for the sacrifice made by those veteran service members as well.
Roger's story, Roger Wise's story of the mother and son.
Yeah.
That
tears your heart out. That brings it home. That makes it really real. What Dave is referring to for the audience's benefit is when we had the wall that heals up in Johns Creek in Newtown Park back in March and April of 2017. There was a mother there during the day, and she had a young man with him. And I say young man, I'm 70 years old. Everything's younger than we are these days. But she had a young man with him. He's in his 40s, maybe early 50s. I'm not sure. But he was kneeling down, and he was mumbling something, like he was talking to the wall himself. And the lady stopped Mr. Wise and said, "Can you wait just a minute? I want to introduce you to my son." So a couple minutes went by, and the young man stood up, and as he turned around, tears running down the front of his face, he said, "Mr. Wise, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for bringing the wall here, because I met my dad today. You see, when my mom, before I was born, when my dad deployed to Vietnam, my mom was 3 months pregnant with me. And then my dad was killed shortly after he got to Vietnam and came home in a flag-draped coffin, so I never got to meet my dad. I met my dad for the first time today." And that's the kind of things that will just bring tears and bring cause for thought about the sacrifices that the family members make when people put on the uniform and go overseas. We had two guys that came in the middle of the night at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and one walked up and looked at the other one and says, "I think I know you." And the guy looked at him and says, "I have no clue what you're talking about." And then the guy started giving him dates, locations, and units in Vietnam. And it turns out these guys were assigned to the same platoon, same infantry platoon in Vietnam. Hadn't seen one another since like 68 or 69 time frame. One lives in Milton, one lives in Johns Creek. They met at the wall. So that healing process helped for them. And I mean, the difference, you could just see the light in their faces come on as, here's an old friend, someone I hadn't seen or talked to, and it's like time stood still. It's like they immediately were right back to that same camaraderie, that same friendship that they developed back in the 60s was right there, regardless of the spans of 40 or 50 years that had passed in between. Simply amazing. And that's part of what we think will happen in Johns Creek to the veterans for North Georgia and the area as well.
Mike, you're, if you don't mind me calling you Mike,
sure.
Sir. I was taught to call you sir, but
that's Michael or hey you or whatever. Yes.
No, you have done a fantastic job, and I appreciate you coming on again today. And we're going to support the wall just as long as traffic doesn't get bad in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
But no, we will be supporting the wall any way that we can. And the people that are listening, I've got to put a plug in for the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. If you have any idea of coming to Atlanta for a vacation or bringing your family here for a weekend, if you're close, or whatever you're planning on doing, there's downtown, there's the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame that a must go to. Now, you need to be there they're not open on the weekends. They're only open Monday through Friday. So work it into your schedule that you can be down there Monday through Friday at some point or the other. And then you've got to put Johns Creek on your agenda as well. And I also want to mention Peachtree City, that has their memorial to veterans. And North Georgia, I don't know, I mean, obviously you don't know what's going on in every state in the Union, but I don't know of any other state and number of communities that are honoring the veterans like North Fulton County and the cities there. Johns Creek being one, Peachtree City being another, and who knows what's going to happen day after tomorrow.
I just met with General Banks and a group over in Cobb County that are planning a memorial in Cobb County as well. It's going to be a beautiful thing. They were looking for ideas and to find out from us, what did you do to get around all of the requirements, the rigidness in some of the communities and stuff. So I commend General Banks and his group over in Cobb County for what they're preparing. It's going to be quite a remarkable monument as well.
And Mike and I were talking earlier, I would like to see, and I'm not starting anything because one, I couldn't afford it, but two, if you don't know what a dust-off is, I guarantee you any Vietnam veteran knows what, and that's the Huey coming to pick them up if they've been wounded, and that's a dust-off pilot that has I don't think I've ever met one that has any regard for their own safety. They're mental cases. They have to be able to put everything aside except for going and getting that wounded person. And I think there should be a gigantic memorial for dust-off pilots and nurses and any of the. And I wanted to say one other thing. That when I was back in the era, I was very misled, and I can't really express what I thought about them at the time, but conscientious objectors. I thought, well, what a bunch of, they won't even go into be brave and heroic like I was and went into the National Guard, which was a joke, but for me anyway. But we had the term conscientious objectors, and the fact of the matter is, and I think there's I can't remember what Rick has told me, but there are a number of them that are in the Hall of Fame. They served without weapons, but many of them went to Fort Sam and became medics. Mm-hmm. And outstanding medics, and they were not cowards. They just had their beliefs, and now the older I get, the more I respect their beliefs and why they did what they did. But they were many of the conscientious objectors turned out being medics and sacrificing their lives to save many others. And I don't know, maybe is there any kind of honorarium or any kind of memorial to medics? Well,
we're actually at Johns Creek Veterans Association in our memorial park. We have space for 3 more memorials. We have 10 in there now, starting with World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, POWs, MIAs, one dedicated entirely to women that served in the military. But we have plans somewhere down the road, if we are able to raise the funds, that we would also like to have one for military chaplains, a separate plaza just for them, a separate plaza for combat medics, as we've discussed, and then also one for military working dogs. That would give us 13 plazas to go along with our water display, plus the gazebo, and now the 240-foot long wall that'll be in when we have the ribbon cutting ceremony on the 28th of March. But yeah, that's exactly right. And then for the dust-offs, I don't know, maybe that was something that we could get one of the other veterans associations or veterans groups to do. I know that American Legion Post 201 has some military aircraft up on some huge pylons that are displayed, a jet, and then there is a helicopter there as well. So maybe we could come up with a program to do some type of dedication memorial placard or something dedicated to the dust-off pilots, and put that over there because they have the space for it. It would be really great to do.
They were incredible, and unfortunately used again in Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and again incredible. I I got to make one last comment, and then we're going to have to put the plug in the jug and get out of here pretty quickly. But as a company commander, there's always one person over you, and you mentioned them in passing just a second ago. That chaplain, and I don't mean literally over you. You may be the colonel in charge, but that chaplain captain, he's got some power that is unbelievable.
Well, a lot of times we say that's our direct line to God. So, we always ask for blessings before and blessings of thank you after the fact as well too. So they are so instrumental. We want to use the during World War II, there was I think it was the USS Dorchester that was sunk it was a troop carrier, and it was going across. It was shot by a U-boat and it sank, and the chaplains took off their vests. They helped people get into life rafts, and then as the boat was sinking, they were standing there arm in arm singing hymns, and all four of them, or five of them, lost their lives that day in that event. So yeah, that would be a very fitting moniker to have on the granite that we put up in there for those, recognizing those chaplains and all that they do. I understand it's gotten a little bit difficult for chaplains in the military service these days with all the political correctness that's out there.
Oh yeah, but I learned the power of the chaplain coming out of AIT. As a matter of fact, and my hometown had been hit by a tornado, and my company commander wouldn't give me a 3-day early out, but it was amazing how fast I was on that plane after I talked to the chaplain. And they serve an incredible purpose, and they're incredible people too, because they're not just one faith. They practice all faiths, really, in many ways. So, with that being said, we got to get out of here, put the plug in the jug, and wrap up another discussion of Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And we're honored that Mike Mizell would take the time to come over and be with us today and talk about the Healing Wall. And I guess it wouldn't be too far afield to say we'll invite the United States to come to the Healing Wall.
Come see the wall. The wall has come home to Georgia March 28th. That's a Saturday. Vietnam Veterans Memorial Park in Johns Creek and Newtown Park. We'd love to see you there.
And they might even get to see some of America's Web Radio there, if we're invited. But anyway,
you are.
We'll see you all next week on America's Web Radio. Thanks for tuning in.
This is Daryl Pullis inviting you to listen to America's Home.